Shout out to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video, more on them at the end. This month, Netflix unleashed their 3-part horror movie event, Fear Street. So today I'm gonna stop and rank all 3 parts from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Let me know your ranking of all 3 parts of the Fear Street Trilogy. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. As a bit of context, I've never read any of the Fear Street books. I haven't actually read any of R.L. Stine's books. I haven't watched any episodes of Goosebumps. I haven't seen the Goosebumps movies. To the best of my knowledge, this is my introduction to the work of R.L. Stine. With that said, let's get started. In last place, part 3, 1666. Now, this was a bit of a frustrating watch because on the one hand, the mythology of this movie, I think, made parts 1 and 2 better. As I understood what was going on, it made me appreciate things in the first 2 parts a whole lot more. The final showdown in the end, I think, tied things up nicely and in a satisfying way. As a bookend to the trilogy, I left satisfied with what they gave me. The problem is that this movie as a singular entity was tonally wildly inconsistent with itself as well as with the rest of the trilogy. But when you go to 1666 and the popular music is gone, the pop culture references are gone, all of the humor is gone, and it's this very serious Salem witch trials-esque story, it just doesn't fit with the previous 2 movies or even the 3rd act of its own film. I feel like they had like 20 minutes of great flashbacks that could have given us the backstory to flesh out the mythology, deliver all those fun twists and turns that made the conclusion satisfying without spending like an hour and 15 minutes in a totally different genre with a totally different tone and having all the cast reappear as different people entirely with accents. I get that they wanted each part to be set in a different time period, but I think by doing that, it put so many constraints on the story that it just made for a very awkward entry and addition to the franchise, even though the finale's very cool. There's a bunch of great kills. I like the mythology. The twists and turns all worked for me. But as a whole, too awkward. Our runner-up, part 1, 1994. Right out of the gate, this movie sets the tone for the franchise, what we're in for, and it's sort of an homage to the horror movies of the different time periods, while also just kind of setting its own tone at the same time. R.L. Stine is known for writing horror for younger ages, and that's what makes the tone of this trilogy kind of weird because it feels like it's horror for 12-year-olds, except it's rated R at the same time. And so it just has a very distinct, unique vibe about it that it took me a little while to get used to. But once I get invested in the story, there's plenty of cool kills. Part 1 raises a bunch of questions about the mythology and everything that's going on. And so I actually liked part 1 a lot more after I watched part 2, and I liked it even more after I watched part 3, because once the mythology was fleshed out, once I understood what was going on, I appreciated the events of this film a whole lot more. Another great thing here was the 90s soundtrack. The whole thing is just jam-packed with all these amazing songs, and as someone that turned 13 in the year 1994, this took me back to that time period and brought out all the nostalgia in just the right ways. There's a lot of great homages to slasher films of the time period. The opening certainly reminded me of the cold open for the movie Scream. But in general, an enjoyable enough slasher film, a bit awkward on first watch because there were so many questions raised with it. I didn't know what was going on, and the tone certainly takes a little while to get used to. But in first place, part 2, 1978. Fear Street's homage to the Friday the 13th franchise, where we have this serial killer on the loose at a camp while the counselors are fornicating, doing drugs, and all sorts of other shady things. What makes me put this one on top is that I feel like this is the most focused of the films. The original one kind of had so much stuff kind of going on that I didn't know how to process all of it. But with a single killer tracking down these people, and we kind of saw how he got infected. We're getting some answers for what went on in the first movie, but raising some questions that are answered in the third. It just had all the pieces that I wanted while being a focused slasher. Another thing that this trilogy of movies did well while being in the slasher franchise is having characters that you actually care about, that have arcs, that have romantic relationships with each other, that have complex friendships where there's strain from the past. And you see that all throughout this film where you actually care when key people are killed because they're slowly reconciling with each other and then dying horrible, brutal deaths at camp. Also, like part one, there's a great 70s rock soundtrack with this one, with just a ton of amazing songs used at just the right points in time. And like part three, I felt like the twists and turns were nice and effective in misdirecting us and helping us see things just a little bit different once we get to the twists and turns. Unfortunately, I did accidentally spoil for myself which Berman sisters survived by reading the cast list on Wikipedia. But in general, part two for me was the one that best captured what this trilogy was going for. It's an homage to slasher films of past decades. It's trying to build out this rich mythology while having characters that you're actually kind of invested in and care what happens to them. This is the one that did that the best, that got me most invested and was most tonally consistent from beginning to end. So it comes in at number one. Now it's time to give a big shout out to today's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace gives people a powerful and beautiful online platform from which to create your website. Squarespace makes it super easy to build an active community with their fully integrated commenting system that allows for both replies and likes. The reason I chose Squarespace when I was putting up my website for my speaking business is because they have so many tools that are easy to integrate and their designs are clean and professional. Go to Squarespace for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/SeanChandlerTalksAbout to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. If you're ready to start a webpage today, the links are down below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.